What's up, everyone? I'm Jason Fitzgerald, and you're watching Q&A with Coach. This is episode 23, and today we're talking about the effects of altitude on your marathon training. Okay, today's question is from Adam, and it's a good one because he's training for a marathon and wants to know if doing his long run at an altitude of 2,000 feet or a little bit higher every week will have any benefit to his marathon race that's coming up. And as someone who lives in Denver, Colorado, the mile-high city at an altitude of about 5,300 feet, I've definitely experienced the effects of altitude, especially when I go higher up in the mountains at elevations of 8 to 10,000 feet, where you really feel the effects of altitude. So Adam's question really boils down to, at what altitude will runners start to see measurable benefits to their racing performance if they're training at a certain altitude? And 2,000 feet is on the extreme low end of when you'll actually be experiencing any effects of altitude. So one of the reasons why altitude is the main reason why altitude is so difficult to deal with as a training as a factor that affects your training is because there's less oxygen in the air. And so if you live at sea level and you fly to Denver, for example, there's less oxygen in the air, and with each breath you're getting less oxygen into your bloodstream. And as we all know, oxygen is what our muscles need to perform at high levels. So if you're trying to do a tempo run or any workout, or especially a race at a higher altitude, you're simply not going to be able to run as fast. It's much more challenging for the body to deliver the much needed oxygen to your working muscles. Now, there have been some studies that show the effects of altitude can be experienced at altitudes as low as 2,000 feet. But will you see any benefit on race day? I think the benefit will be negligible. I think you have to get up to at least 4,000 to 5,000 feet for some of your key workouts for you to really experience any big benefits. All the elite runners, most elite runners will go to an altitude training camp, especially those training for longer distance races. And those camps tend to be anywhere between 6,000 and 8,000 feet. And a lot of runners tend to find that the 7,000 foot altitude mark is kind of the sweet spot for training. So, 2,000 feet is again on the very low end. And I don't think that, Adam, you're going to experience any significant benefits to training at that point and then going down to sea level. Now, with that said, is it bad to train at, say, 2,000 or 3,000 feet and then race at sea level? No, of course not. I think you're going to get a little bit of benefit, and the higher you go up, the more benefit you're going to get. Until you reach a certain point of maybe 8,000 or 9,000 feet, where you're simply not going to be training at the paces that you're going to be racing at on race day. So if it were me, I would do my long runs at 2,000 feet altitude before the marathon, and try to hit the same paces that you would be hitting on race day. In other words, don't make any modifications to your pacing because you're at a slightly higher altitude. Just pretend like you're at sea level, hit the paces like you normally would, and then and that will transfer over really well to the day of your race. The other issue about altitude that I want to cover is if you're at a significant altitude of maybe 5,000 or 6,000 feet, when the effects of being at altitude really start being apparent, then it's probably not a good idea to be running your entire training season at altitude, unless you're like me and you happen to live at higher altitude and there's no other way to do all of the running that you need to do. Because if you're doing all of your faster workouts at altitude, they're going to be a lot slower than if you were at sea level. And so if you're going up, if you live in a town where you can easily get up to higher altitude and say do your faster workouts there and then come back down at sea level, you can do that once in a while, and I think there's some real benefits to that strategy. But if you're doing that for every single workout, for every single long run, then you're not getting the pace work and really ingraining in your muscles what it feels like to run at a certain pace that you would get at sea level. So if you're training to run, say, a 5K, and this is different than Adam's question for the marathon, but I think it's important. If you're training for a 5K and your goal pace is, let's say, 8 minutes per mile, but at altitude you can only run 8:30 pace, then on race day, you might have a lot of aerobic benefits because you've been doing your workouts at altitude. But I think you're doing yourself a disservice not to be practicing the exact pace that you will be running on race day. There's a lot to be said for pace specificity, meaning running the actual pace that you will be attempting to run on race day. So I think a mix and match approach works really well here. For Adam specifically, doing some of his long runs at a slightly higher altitude, I think, can have some benefit, but doing some of the more pace-specific workouts at sea level also has some benefit. So I would definitely do a little bit of both to really make sure that you're getting all the benefits of running at sea level and all the benefits of training at a slightly higher altitude. All right, thanks for tuning in to episode 23 of Q&A with Coach. I'd love to answer your question, so if you have it, just find me on Twitter. My handle is JasonFitz1, and go ahead and ask me your questions. I'm happy to answer as many as I can on the show. Thanks again, and I'll see you in episode 24.